Hello, everyone. My name is Nicholas Mastoras, and for my term project, I selected the challenge of reducing academic procrastination amongst us as college students. But the scientific paper I used is toward a holistic approach to reducing academic procrastination with classroom interventions by Akira Miyake and Michael Caine, which you'll see on the final slide where I did cite my sources. But on another note, in this particular presentation, I'm going to explain the challenge. I'm going to discuss the research findings and just propose a more realistic response that universities and professors could definitely implement to help us as students procrastinate less and just become more successful from an academic standpoint. So, the challenge I selected focuses on academic procrastination, not just any kind of particular procrastination, which is something that affects many of us college students. But before reading this article, I kind of just assumed that procrastination was kind of just caused by laziness or some sort of lack of motivation. But, the research kind of showed me that procrastination is oftentimes caused by things like stress, people feeling overwhelmed, distractions that come along on day-to-day basis, and just difficulties with time management and regulating. But one of the more major findings from the article is that there's no really particular single solution that completely eliminates procrastination, but rather there is a more effective approach, and that approach is just to use several small classroom interventions together. The authors in this particular source explained that multiple strategies are definitely a more successful way to go about things rather than just kind of relying on one. But on another note, I also found that college students benefit from supportive classroom environments, and they really help them stay organized and engaged throughout the semester. And it's also important that I should note that I know college is, the time in one's academic career where being extremely independent is extremely beneficial because it's not like, especially on an online course like this, you don't have a teacher or a professor kind of really pushing you, asking you questions constantly. You kind of have to go get that yourself. So, yes, independence is great, but there can still be some sort of arrangements put together to kind of help students stay on track, like many of the successful professors do online. But based on these findings, my proposed response would just be pretty much to implement several classroom interventions at the university level. Professors could do things like breaking larger assignments into smaller deadlines, like we do in this class, and just kind of provide reminders for upcoming assignments, just like how we get those Outlook emails. Um, they could also encourage students to reflect on their study habits and definitely offer some resources that teach time management skills, which I imagine office hours do a fantastic job of that. But with a focus on more of the university's standpoint, things like workshops or educational materials, especially during freshman year, orientation can definitely, you know, maybe improve on what procrastination is, and how students can develop better study habits. So I'm a particular student, for example, that came from a community college called Moraine Valley over in Palos Hills, Illinois. So my freshman year of college was spent there, and I did play baseball there as well. And I was kind of they had things like that. They had athletic academic advisors that helped us manage time, with things like course selection. We had mandatory study hours during the week that we had to get to in order to be eligible for game day and things like that. So the opportunities were definitely there. That school during my freshman year did a fantastic job. Now, I can't speak on UIC's because I was a transfer student that came here my junior year, but little things like that can really, create small strategies that students would definitely benefit from having that support and definitely will be more likely to stay on top of their coursework. But oops. So on the wrap up slide, this research pretty much taught me that academic procrastination is a lot more complicated than I originally thought coming into this topic. Students should not procrastinate simply, excuse me, students do not procrastinate just because they're lazy or whatever, but a lot of them struggle because, like I said earlier, they just feel overwhelmed. They might feel stressed, or they just lack effective strategies for managing responsibilities. Maybe they didn't know ahead of time, or maybe they just didn't take enough initiative. But I definitely believe that smaller classroom interventions can definitely make a meaningful difference in helping students succeed. Um, opposed to expecting students to solve procrastination on their own, kind of like how I hit that independence piece earlier in the presentation. Universities and professors can provide tools and support which will definitely encourage better habits and more than likely improve academic performance overall. But as you can see, that final question I have here on this bullet point, one question I would ask is whether or not universities should consider making time management or little, workshops mandatory for first year students. Since many of these students struggle with issues early on in college, can they be nipped in the butt kind of early on? Or should we kind of just remain with what we're doing? Like I said, I'm not particular certain whether UIC has something like this in place. I'm going to go ahead and take my best educated guess and say that they do. But like I said, having not spent my freshman year here, I cannot really speak on that. But I do think it is a great question to ask, and really take a step back, like I said, for administration, professors, and people in a position of authority to really weigh out the pros and cons and see if everything's in place and how they can benefit their student body. But, finally, obviously, here's the APA citation for the scientific article that I used throughout my project. I really appreciate you listening in, and thank you.